Well, hello there. This is Brother Craig again, and I'm just picking up where I left off a few minutes ago when I did the first teaching on slavery. And so I just want you to know that the Lord treasures all people. He really does. And even people who are slaves. He cares a lot about them. He cares about poor people enormously. And you're going to find as we go through the scriptures that the Lord does not want poor people to ever be taken advantage of. He doesn't want poor farmers to ever be taken advantage of. He doesn't want anybody who's wealthy and powerful to be able to oppress the poor. And this is one of those wonderful teachings that we have. Now, chapter 21, if you read through it, you're going to find that it's a little bit jumbled. And so what I've done is I've tried to unjumble these commandments, because what they do is it's almost like they rhyme in terms of they're going from one subject, and then God goes on to another subject, then he goes on to another subject, and then he comes back to the first subject, and then he goes on to the second one, and then it's the third one, and he just kind of does this round robin on all of these commandments. So you have to sort of pull them, maybe numerically, you have to move them out of place in order to develop that whole stream of thought. And so there are a couple of different subjects here in addition to this, which I need to talk to you about. And these are basic laws that govern society. The very first one I want to deal with you in Exodus 21 is the relationship between children and parents. Now, you might notice that in American society, a lot of children feel like they're quite liberated to sound off at their parents and to be disrespectful and to even punch or hit them. Sometimes, young people can just get carried away with themselves. Well, sometimes parents can get a little carried away too, okay? But I'm going to just point out to you, if you turn to Exodus chapter 21, verse 15 and verse 17, these two verses, it says, "Whoever strikes his father or his mother shall be put to death. Whoever curses his father or mother shall be put to death." Does that sound like maybe God is serious about this? He really is. He does not approve of at all young people showing disrespect for their parents. But this also applies to, grown men and women who punch or curse their older fathers and mothers. I have seen sometimes middle-aged people saying terrible things about their parents, or even getting physical and getting violent with them. So the Lord makes it very clear that anybody who does that, they're to be put to death. And this is a judgment that society needs to put on these people. I would hope that just these two lines right there, these two commandments, would cause every young person to say, I'm not ever going to say a bad thing about my parents, and I'm certainly not going to lift a hand against them. So that is in dealing with fathers and children, fathers and mothers and children. Let's move on to a whole bunch of different subjects here. These are all going to be developed further in other commandments, but these lay it out that there's going to be some penalties in different regards for other things, or compensation. So I call this section the laws regarding compensation for damages and the death penalty. So one of the things I'd like to point out to you is Genesis chapter 9, verses 5 through 6. You might recall that after Noah got off the ark and let all of the creatures on the ark loose, he built an altar and he sacrificed to the Lord. And then the Lord gave him some additional commandments. And here's one of the things the Lord commanded, even way back in the time of Noah. God said, And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. Do you understand that? So God is making it clear that whether it's a man or an animal that slays another man, another human being, that human or that animal is going to die. God will see to it about the animals as well as the people. So this is his commandment in regard to all of this. So with this, I'm going to read for you out of Exodus chapter 21, starting at verse 12. And there's a number of verses interspersed here which are going to cover this. Okay, so God says, whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint for you a place to which he may flee. But if a man willfully attacks another to kill him by cunning, you shall take him away from my altar, that he may die. Okay, so here's the thing. There were people who were witnessed to have accidentally killed another person, and the person who accidentally killed the victim knows he's in huge trouble, and he's not just in trouble with the government, he's really in trouble with the family of the deceased. The family of the deceased are going to want compensation, and the ancient practices of blood vengeance were very, very severe, and the family, if they find out that their loved one has been killed, they'll just get up a posse of brothers and fathers and uncles, and they'll go after him, and they'll hunt him down and kill him. But if he has not done it willfully, he didn't mean to kill the man, it was what we would today call manslaughter. It was an accidental killing. Maybe it was done out of negligence or carelessness, but it wasn't on purpose. There was no desire to do it that way. And so he didn't do it what the Bible calls here by cunning. He did it accidentally. Well, then he could do something. He could go to the tabernacle and he could grab hold of the horn of the altar. There are 4 horns that we'll find on the altar. And he will be able to grab hold of the horn of the altar, and the priests will appoint for him for there to go to a city of refuge, and there he will live until his court case comes up. He's going to have a trial. And you can bet that the family of the deceased are going to be there, but they don't get to touch him. Because as far as the witnesses have already said, it was just an accident. So he's going to be able to get protection. You understand, they had no jails, and they didn't have any ornate system that we have today for protecting people. So this is the best that they could do, and especially for a nomadic people, this is the best that they could do. But if he was witnessed to have risen up and attacked a man, and he did it on purpose, he attacked him, it wasn't self-defense, this was a case of murder, then there's not going to be any protection for him on this sort of thing. He'll be held over for trial, and then he'll be executed, is what God is saying. So the death penalty comes into play here for murder. And I will just say to you, I was stunned in this COVID-19 hour of our lives that we have a lot of people who are being let out of prison right now by the jails and by the prisons. And one of the people who almost got let out of prison this week was Gary Ridgway, the otherwise known as the Green River Killer. Only by one vote was he allowed or made to stay in prison. He was almost going to be let out on the streets. Can you imagine that? You see, God doesn't tolerate this sort of thing. God makes it very clear that if a man murders somebody else, he is to die. That's the death penalty. And there are going to be some different areas here where the death penalty will come into play. All right? So we need to take this into consideration very carefully. Let me jump down to verse 16. It says, "Whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him, shall be put to death." So kidnapping somebody and holding somebody as a slave, that's the death penalty. I mean, using a person as a slave, that is not acceptable before the Lord. So a slave, in the sense of an abject slave, a person who has no rights, and somebody who's going to be just held in bondage, that's deplorable to the Lord, and that's also a death penalty. So, verse 18, we have, "When men quarrel, and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and the man does not die, but takes to his bed, then if the man rises again and walks outdoors with his staff, he who struck him shall be clear. Only he shall pay for the loss of his time, and shall have him thoroughly healed." Well, okay, so they get into a fight, two guys, and one of them gets hit, and maybe he gets punched, and he lands on a rock, and he hits his head, and he's knocked unconscious. The person who was fighting him didn't mean to do that, but this man is crippled, and his family is in a very dire situation because this fellow, the victim, is now no longer able to pay his way in life, nor his family. So to make sure that the family is kept intact and the man is taken care of adequately, what the scripture says here is that the violent person who hit him is going to have to make it right. If he didn't intend to murder him, and he didn't murder him, but the man was able to get up eventually, and he was able to walk with his staff, then God says that the victimizer, the man who gave him a beating, is going to have to pay the full cost of his recuperation and taking care of his family and so forth. And it says that he shall be clear. The man who gave a beating to the other person shall be clear, but clear only in the sense that he's going to have to pay money up front to take care of this man and his family, and it'll be an ongoing cost to this man. If he can't pay the cost, then he'll be sold by the community as a slave to somebody else, and that money will be then applied to the victim and his family. And that will be how it will work. Verse 12. Verse 22. I can't see very well. "When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman, so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judge determines. But if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe." This is a passage that is going to be quoted in different places in the Bible. And of course, a lot of people have quoted this. Maybe one of the few things that they know about the Bible is this here. This eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. Okay, well, let's break that down just a little bit here. It says here, If two guys are fighting, they're just getting really rowdy and they're fighting, and they accidentally or on purpose, one of them punches a pregnant woman in the belly, and she immediately goes into contractions and she delivers the babies prematurely. Then it says that if the baby comes out dead or the woman is herself harmed out of it, permanently harmed out of it, and if the children themselves or the babies die, then it's going to be an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth thing. In other words, you killed the baby, now your life is forfeit. Okay. But if there's no harm, then, in other words, there's no lasting harm and the babies are fine and the woman recovers, then there's going to be a penalty as the woman's husband assesses on him in court, in jail. And so there's going to be a just compensation of some kind. Is this a perfect law? No. Can it be developed? Can it be improved on? Yes, it is. But, this is a very, very good start in the whole area of just compensation for injuries. Now, with this in mind, this eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, let me just talk to you about what Messiah Yeshua said. Remember last time I told you that a lot of subjects are going to be introduced in the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of the Bible. Let's see, what are they? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Those first 5 books of the Bible, they're going to be developed. And they're going to be foundational for everything that is going to come in the rest of the Bible. So you have teachings that are being introduced here, and they're going to find their culmination, their more perfect expression in the New Testament. Okay? So what does Jesus say in the New Testament? He says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you." This is a very heavy teaching. And if you thought that the teaching out of Exodus 21 was hard, take a look at that. That's in Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 through 42. You see, the Lord is not arguing that eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth is appropriate. But when you're getting into personal relationships, and particularly as the church is relating to the rest of the world, we always need to show grace to other people. And it was a habit of even the rabbis in the time of Christ. If a rabbi was angry with another rabbi, he would slap the other rabbi in the face. And the other rabbi might slap him right back. Why? Because they're having an argument about a theological point. Or maybe the other one would grab him by the beard and pull on the beard and go, "Ah!" And so then the other guy would grab him by the beard and, "Ah!" Well, you can see how this is going. Really? Is this really how we are, as Christians, are supposed to operate? So what the Apostle Paul also said was, as much as it is within you, live at peace with other people. Don't live your life in such a way as to be at war with other people. Okay? So show grace through everything. And this might mean even with the people who are running the government, you need to be gracious to them. I know there's some feelings right now. Some people are beginning to protest the lockdown and everything, but I'm just telling you that the governor and the state governments and the national government, they have authority to make some decisions in regard to what is appropriate and what is inappropriate at this time, and we just sort of have to go along with some of these things. And we need to, as even if we're kind of feeling frustrated, we need to be inclined to show some grace to everybody involved in this, right? There's one more little passage here in Exodus chapter 21, and it's starting in verse 28. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten. But the owner of the ox shall not be liable. But if the ox has been accustomed to goring in the past, and its owner has been warned but has not kept it in, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner also shall be put to death. If a ransom is imposed on him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is imposed on him. If it gores a man's son or daughter, he shall be dealt with according to this same rule. If an ox gores a slave, male or female, the owner shall give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. Did you know they had mad cow disease even back in those days? But I will just tell you that I have been around farm animals enough to know haven't been around them a lot, but there's some farm animals that are very distempered. And there are some bulls that they're very territorial, and if they see you crossing anywhere close to them, they'll come after you. And any animal that is mean needs to be penned up. It needs to be corralled. But if a master's not going to do that, then that can come back on him in a very bad way. We have in our society today people who have dogs, and sometimes these dogs can get very, very vicious, and they can get out and they can bite somebody and really do serious, long-lasting harm. So, owners like that, no, they're not taken outside the gates of the cities and stoned to death, but they are going to be penalized for it. If they had an animal that they didn't realize was dangerous, then society is more apt to just say, well, from now on, keep your wild pets cooped up, or with an animal. The animal may very well be put down. And so this is a very serious thing, and there's compensation here. There's an effort here at trying to have some understanding for the owner of a mean animal, but then there's also the very serious consideration of what is in the best interest of the people who are involved in this. And so what you have here then is just compensation being provided for, and sometimes some people getting the death penalty who actually should have known better and done better. That's not the end of the teaching in Torah. There's so much more to come. And so now what I would like to do is to address in the next lesson. For the next week, I'm going to deal with the subject of restitution. And we're sort of bridging into that right here with this lesson, but now we're going to move into it in greater level. And it has simply to do with what happens when, different people do things to you that hurt you. And what kind of compensation should you get? Or should you even get any compensation? That'll be for next time, okay? So blessings to you, my beloved.